All right. So let's see here. Hey, everybody. Go ahead and feel free to start asking questions. And jobs. Whoops, I'm misspelling. There we go. So today I am going to talk about kind of what it's like to kind of go through academia and from an undergrad or really like coming out of high school to a graduate student to getting a job. And I'm taking any questions that come in, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start off by just talking a little bit about those different avenues, because I'm a pretty untraditional student slash teacher, and that I was not destined to be a college professor. I just became one through happenstance, and that I was in high school, and I happen to have a brother that was a little older than me that was pretty good with computers and had gone to some summer camps and things like that. And I ended up getting invited to some engineering camps, and that's when I kind of really started thinking about, oh, okay, like I may have to really go to college. And I did some engineering camps specifically, and so I started looking into like doing mechanical engineering, and so that's actually what I started off doing when I was at UT Austin. Was I got into the UT program because I went to this special program at UT in the summer and got some letters of recommendation from some professors there, and that's kind of the story that really kind of got me going in terms of figuring out how to navigate through like traditional spaces, being a non-traditional student, because I wasn't in the top 10% of my class. I wasn't the smartest person in the room most of the time. But what I did have was like a bunch of enthusiasm, and I had a lot of passion for just learning and doing and making. And so when it came time for me to go to college, I went to my mechanical engineering orientation, and I sat down, and there were like 100 people in the orientation, and they were like, "This is going to be the hardest 4 years of your life." And I was like, "Wow, okay." And my body got a little uncomfortable, and they're like, "This is a competition." And I looked around, and it was like 95% guys, like 5 women. And I just kind of was like, I don't know. I think maybe I got to get out of here. And before I knew it, when I was thinking that, I was like, I stood up and I walked out the door. And in the spring of my and fall of my senior year, I had worked on the high school senior prom video, to remember everything by. And I had built a computer with my brother to like make this thing happen. And I had learned about video editing and hardware and software. And this was like in the early 2000s, when it was like this huge boom to kind of start doing video by ourselves on a small budget. And so so that's kind of how I got over to the radio, television, film department. And then once I was in there, it was like a huge playground, and I met Sandy Stone, my mentor, and who would end up being the chair of my dissertation committee. And I got involved with the program that she had put together about taking risks, or make stuff, take risks, and be awesome was our motto. And not only did I get to learn doing that, I also got to teach people how to do that. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And so around when I finished my bachelor's, I got into the master's program. And at that point, I was going to school because I just was like, well, I mean, I should probably get as much education as possible. That was the only thing I had been taught, was that like you go to school, and if you go to school, you'll do well. You go to school, you'll succeed and you'll get a job. And I think now, 20 years later, looking back, I've done all right, but that actually isn't the case for everybody. And it was a really expensive endeavor. I mean, I spent $150,000 on my education. Just a reminder, I'm just telling y'all a little bit about my own background in academia, and y'all can ask questions at any time. And y'all can also ask me a question that's focused on you, like something you're trying to get to work out, because I can always come back to my story. But what I really want to do during this time is just kind of field some questions and see what y'all are facing. So, oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm taking care of myself. I've been working out, and I've been doing a ton of power washing. That's like my zen. I have a friend that's like has a professional business power washing, and he saw my video and was like, dude, you could have just hired me. And I was like, yeah, no, like, kind of going back to how I was an untraditional student. Like, I started mowing yards when I was 5 years old. Not because like my parents were like, you need to learn how to mow. It was like, that was my passion. That was one of my passions. So even to this day, it's like, I remember I was teaching at the University of Incarnate Word, and I had a student post up about how this lawn was unsurmountable for him to mow, and that he had a lawnmower that he just couldn't do it though. And you'd pay someone $100 to do it. And I was like, dude, I would love to come and mow your yard. And everybody just thought I was crazy. And I totally just went and like mowed this kid's yard. And it was so unruly. It took like 4 passes to get it down. I had to like keep lowering it. But it was like, I don't know. There's just something very rewarding about doing it. It takes me back to being a kid. And my brother and I was talking to my older brother that was really smart. He and I drove like a little Datsun pickup, and we had like lawnmowers and weed eaters in the back, and a little blower and bags to pick up all the leaves and stuff. And so that was like how we made money. That was like how we got extra money to go do stuff. All the way until, today, I guess, because I'll still do it. I also detail people's cars. If you go to my Instagram, here, I'll pull up my Instagram for y'all. It's in the link. Don't forget to like and subscribe, by the way, to my channel. I have to have 1,000 subscribers in order to stream off my phone, which is something I learned as well. So that's my Instagram if you want to go like that. But you'll see like I detail cars and things like that. So coming back to school, so I was going through school, but like the reality of it is that I actually had like 3 different things that I did in my 20s that really came to fruition and were I don't know if the word's I don't know, they had good synergy, I'll put it that way. I had school, I had hi-fi, and I had tech. So, obviously I was doing my BS and then my MA, my PhD from 99 to 2010. And then at that same time, I got really into hi-fi. I got into listening to records and hi-fi amps and speakers. And so I got so into it that I wanted to do it. I wanted to like own a shop or something. And I would go to my local shop, Concert Sound in San Antonio, and I would just bug them all the time. And then I found out that there was one in Austin. So I visited this one in Austin that was across the street, literally from where I went to school. And the guy was like, I need a new website. And I had just learned how to make websites by hand using like the Notepad editor. And I said, I'll make you a website. So I made him a website. We traded for some speakers, and there's Whetstone Audio. Great guy, Brian DeFrank, still friends with him. Even though I have a shop here and he has a shop up there, like we go back, because I've known him for, like 20 years. And And then I came back to the shop that I helped, not that I helped, but that I was soon to help in San Antonio, and I would work with them. And they asked me to make them a website. So I made them a website. And then the guy's business partner ended up having to move. So I worked for this guy. His name really was Creston Funk. And his business partner was Mark Heaston, and Mark had to move out of town. And so he was like, hey, do you want to help me when you're not in school? And so I literally for like 2 years just drove back and forth from San Antonio to Austin, just back and forth, running this shop, going to school, taking these classes, learning all this tech. And also, since I had a bad hi-fi habit, I needed to also make like other money to like support my hi-fi habit. I'll never forget, like I bought this pair of speakers. My parents were like, how are you, like, what are you doing? And I was like, I think I need to get a job to like get them off of me on this. And so I applied for a job working for UT Austin in their multimedia production lab in the School of Communication. And so that's what I ended up doing was I ended up like working like this state job, going to school, running a hi-fi store. And then as I got into graduate school, I met this colleague of mine named Brandon Wiley, which changed my life forever. I mean, just forever. He was a genius, or is a genius. One of the nicest people ever. Those of y'all that have met him know he's just amazing. You can look him up on Google. He runs a nonprofit now called Operator, and he works on anonymity and obfuscation, which sounds really technical and is really technical, but basically he fights for our civil liberties online so that we can navigate the web and transmit information across the web in a way that is unencumbered by governmental agencies, so that like journalists can get information out in places that have really strict firewalls and things like that. So so he and I started hanging out. When I met him, he was working on a peer-to-peer video gaming protocol and actually finished it that semester. And I was just kind of not aloof, but like one of the things I had to learn about myself was that while I have a lot of great ideas, I tend to also be able to just help other people. I mean, that's the name of my YouTube channel is Joey PhD Helping Others. And so that's what I did a lot of, is that I would just sit and kind of like, I call it putting my anthropologist hat on. And by the way, anybody that just joined, like you can just ask any question. I'm just talking because like I haven't got a question yet. So if you're asking a question that you're trying to do yourself. So anyway, so I put this anthropologist hat on, and I would just like if I was in class, I was just sitting there watching. If I was around people doing tech, I was just sitting there listening. If I was, if I was at the shop and I met someone that had this profession, or because I would, when you work at a hi-fi store, everybody there is pretty happy because like they're there to come and listen to music and have fun. So that's like a really positive environment. And then two, they're usually pretty successful and open-minded, pretty creative. And so I was just meeting all kinds of people, from doctors, lawyers, ad execs, venture capitalists. Like I met a little bit of everybody there. And so, people that ran newspapers and things like that. And so I was always just kind of around and just soaking it in. And one of the things I always tried to do was like learn by listening, not by doing a lot. Meaning that I would try and hear people's failures and be like, yeah, that's not what I want to do. Like, I don't want to end up in that situation. So not gonna do that. Or I'm gonna try and heed when they say this is when you should start looking around. That's when I start looking around. So so that's like how I kind of navigated like these three spaces, and I would just make them work. Like I was writing papers about hi-fi, I was writing papers about technology, I was going to conferences like South by Southwest and sitting in on the panels and just listening in. I was making stuff, so I was making websites, I was working with Brandon, and we had all kinds of projects. Like we worked with Google one time for Google Summer of Code, and we had interns, and we worked on some streaming protocols. And so it was one of those things where we really were kind of living these multiple lives at once, and that I was trying to get as much experience without necessarily it just being like in class. Like one of the things I notice a lot in academia right now at both the undergrad and graduate level is that most people I meet, they go to school and like they're like, well, I'm taking this class and what do I have to do for this class, and this is how how I'm going to get by. And for me, I often sit there and think, okay, well, what can I take from the class and go do outside, and what can I take from outside and do in my class, so that I'm just constantly evolving what I'm doing and being able to iterate and go through my process just that much faster, so that I can gain that much more information. Because one of the things that like made me an intangible in most of my classes was that I had like gone to an inner city school. I had experienced a lot of things that they read about. I had experienced, when they were talking about privilege and when they were talking about, identity politics and things like that. I went to an inner city school and I was that dumb kid, like quantitatively and in terms of what classes they put me in. And so, when we're talking about the disenfranchised and how we get out of that, like those were my friends. I had friends that lived on dirt roads. Like it wasn't all just, rainbows for me. And I know some of y'all even have grown up that way. Working at A&M, I've gotten to see a lot of people also that are either first generation or are from really rural areas where you're getting experiences that are just different. And so when you go into school and you start having kind of these narratives where you talk about identity politics and things like that, you kind of start going like, well, I mean, I know you read that, but like, have you gone there and experienced that? That's another thing that I get into a lot when I do civic engagement and work with communities, is that, I'll go talk to politicians or policymakers, and they have these opinions about the data that they've looked at and the research that they've done, but they've never actually gone and talked to the communities and seeing, what they're doing and how they're doing it and the resources that they are or aren't taking advantage of. So, and then I also take that and then I'll flip it into to my hi-fi store, and I'm like, okay, well, where are people getting educated about hi-fi? What is the narrative we need to be telling? How do we create a space where people can feel empowered in the purchases that they're making and that they feel comfortable with it? And then I'll take that and I'll flip that and I'll go into my classroom and I'll be like, okay, so I sell things at my hi-fi store. Now, what am I doing here? Well, here it's like I have customers, aka my students, that are here to obtain knowledge and information about this topic. Now, how do I make sure that they're happy with how I'm doing it? How do I make sure that I'm engaging them? How do I make sure that they got the information they needed and that they're prepared to go out into the real world? And so, that's a lot of what I've done, is that I'll take things that I think are cool projects and then I'll turn them upside down, flip them around, flip them again, and see how they can apply in other spaces that I'm working in. All right. So can y'all hear me clearly? I see some of y'all on there. Just wondering if y'all can hear me. Someone could just put a little reply in. That'd be awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah. So basically what I started doing once I was in graduate school was that I started talking to people that were undergrads about what they wanted to do. What do you want to do when you graduate? Or what do you want to do while you're going to school? And I get all kinds of responses. Some were looking into graduate school, some had no idea. Some wanted to go do things that had nothing to do with what they went to school for. And then some wanted to go do what they said school was going to teach them to do, but didn't. Which, because like in radio, television, film, I mean, come on. I mean, you can get a degree in it, but unless you're like doing it, it's just not it, right? If you want to go be in Hollywood films, it's like, yeah, you can go get a degree in radio, television, film. That doesn't mean you're going to be in Hollywood making films. So I had one student that did, though, that was like, yeah, I want to go to Hollywood and I want to be a stunt person. And they actually came into our class. His name's Jason Wynn. came into our class. He said that people call him the Asian cowboy, and we were like, okay. We were like, well, what do you do? He's like, I'm a stunt person, and we were all like, okay. And then for real, like, he gets up on our table and just falls off the table. And he's like, that's how you do a forward fall. And then like he stands back up and like falls on his back. He's like, that's how you do a back fall. And then he falls off the table and onto a chair and off the chair and stands up. And we're just like, he's like, I'm a stunt man. We're like, oh, you're like a stunt person, like for real. And he was like, yeah, I work at Six Flags in Dallas and I do their show. And we were like, oh. So about probably a year after he had been taking some classes with us, he comes up to me and he says, they're going to be closing the stunt show that we do. And this summer, I want to still have a job at Six Flags. So I want to propose a Chinese lion dance show, because I do Chinese lions dance. He's a Vietnamese. And I wanted to put like a presentation together. So for like 6 weeks, he would come to my office hours and we would just sit there and work on his project, his pitch and his business proposal, like, how many people it was going to be, how much it was going to cost, the equipment needed, insurance, like everything. And he put this whole proposal together, and then he presented it to them, and they were like, yeah, we'll do it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's always one of those things where you sit there and you work with someone, and it's really cool to see when it comes together. And so now, 15 years later, it's like he's a professional stunt person. Like the other day, I was watching this movie called Hop for Easter with my kid and our family. And I'm like, there's like some like talent audition in the movie, and it's like they have this freaking lion dancer in there. And I'm like, dude, that's Jason. Like, no, like seriously, pause it. Like, I'm like, that's him. And then my wife like texts him. It's like, hey, were you in Hop? And he's like, yeah, that was me. And we're like, oh my gosh, I mean, yeah, you're legitimately a stunt person, that's for sure. And yeah, so it's like it's one of those things where I really feel like if you want to get experience, you just start going and doing it and imitating it and trying and putting yourself out there, teaming up with people, looking for mentors. Like that's all pretty standard issue cheesy stuff, in my opinion, to tell people. But my thing is that like wrap it around what you really want to be doing it. It can't be what your family wants you to do or what others want you to do. It has to be what drives you, because thousands of hours later, you're the one that's going to be putting the time and the effort into it. And if that like fades out, that's okay. Maybe you need to move on to something else. But a lot of people, I think, really have a hard time just getting started or having the confidence to kind of sit there and go like, yeah, I want to go and try that. There was a lot of students that I've just gotten to see be really successful and go on and get jobs and do what they love. For me, I never thought I'd open a hi-fi store. I loved doing it. I loved running the shop. I did it all the way till about 2010 when I finished my school. And then when I moved back to San Antonio, I was teaching full time. And so I was like, yeah, I can't do this. I'm just not, I wanted to put all my time into teaching, into this program that I had to build. And so that's what I did. I mean, when I taught at UIW, it was like, I was there Saturday and Sunday, students coming in, working on projects. It was totally different than where I teach now. And not in a bad way or a good way, just different. The classes were a lot smaller, so there was like 10 to 15 students. And it took me about a year and a half to gain some momentum and have 5 to 10 students. And then throughout the years, I'd probably had like 5 to 15 students that were working on stuff. And again, these weren't graduate students. These are undergrads and graduate students that were just interested in doing something that was in between academia and production. It was like, thoughtful production where people are like thinking about what they're doing, why they're doing it. So it's like you're making a horror film, but there's a layer to it. you're doing projection mapping, but what you're showing is really different. You have a pitch for a business, but the technology you're using to pitch it is different. I'll never forget, I had a student at UIW that was a master's student and took my social media class. And where did he work at the time? I don't remember. I don't remember where he worked at the time, but by the end of the class, he had gone to a local restaurant in a small town, Natalia, and Texas, and had done some social media work and menu revamping for this restaurant, and it just did really well, and it kind of took off. And so he then took that and applied for a job at the local community college and got a job as like a multimedia specialist. And then he was just someone that was very much like how I kind of pitch, is that like you just got to keep trying different things and doing different things. And now he's like he's in charge basically of social media for the whole Alamo area colleges, and that's what he does. But even before then, he got a job like at Schreiner University, doing he was like their new media director, and I got to go out there and visit with him and help him cover some things. And like we went and covered some skeet shooting national tournament that they were in here in San Antonio, and we were doing like some GoPro and some photography stuff and just kind of figuring out how to best shoot a lot of the content. And to me, that's like what's really interesting when you really start beveling in on people's interests, is that like I'll tag along with you. Like you ask me and it's interesting, I'll be like, yeah, I'll go check that out. Or if you're like, hey, I want to go to do that, I want to go see that, I'll be like, all right, let's go. I had one year where I had one of my students who's now a colleague at A&M, this guy named Jonathan Guajardo, and my business partner, Christian Rios, who I own a business with now. Back in like 2011, they were bugging me. They were like, we want to do audio production. We're like, we want to be DJs. So that's what we did for like a year. And they ended up playing like every club in San Antonio, basically, except for Rio, I think. That was a pretty big club. Hard to get into. And we even threw a party and, floated some kegs and stuff like that at the school, which is funny because I don't drink. Had a TABC licensed servers, had a designated driver program. It was all done legitimately, to the point that like our department would have like a gala every year. And it got to the point where like once we threw our party, the gala people were like, hey, like, can you help us with some of our event planning ideas? And we were like, sure. And we had all been into like lighting and projectioning and just kind of different stuff. And so by the time we were having the galas, it was like our crew was showing up with like a third of the gala was like just people from Convergent Media that wanted to come and kind of just have fun. And you can see all of this if you go to our Facebook page, Convergent Media Collective. You'll see photos of the DJing and of the galas and like just all kinds of crazy stuff. Now that I'm at A&M, I'll be finishing up my second year. My first year, I started as a lecturer, and that's real interesting because a lecturer is like you're just paid to teach 4 classes and you go home, and that's it. Like you teach your 4 classes, you go home, and it's like an entry-level job. It's a great job. Don't get me wrong; you get health benefits, but it's an entry-level job. It pays like $40,000 a year, so it's something that you can do for a while. But you eventually want to move up. And I was very fortunate in that I got offered to move up right away. But while I was doing that, one of the things I did right when I got there was I was like, I had applied for 40 different jobs that year, and I got this one. And when I got my office, I was just like, I just need to make the office like the office I had at my last job, and just like sit in here as if I have a big job, as if I am already helping, 5 to 20 students at a time work on their projects, reach their aspirations. And that's what I did. Was I just walked in there and just started doing it like as if I had been there this whole time, rather than kind of thinking, oh, well, I don't want to put something up here that may rock the boat. It's like I had park hands, which are like LED lights, and I had like my own computer and like audio equipment, and I had like VHS decks, and I had all this, some Arduinos and just different stuff, rather than just having like a blank desk and being like, well, this is what they gave me, this is what I can use. Was that like I knew to go in there and really run with what they had given me. And now I have a lab, and I have a bunch more tech, and I got some grants, and that was through the support of the department. And then, obviously I put some work in too, but like, it really turned out to be a great place to work at for me, even though like, no job is perfect. I've seen some things that I don't like seeing there and that I think need to be worked on. But for the most part, it was a lesson for me in that, like my last institution that I worked at, when I was talking to y'all about UIW and had done all these great things, and it was not appreciated whatsoever there. They did not like me. They wanted me gone. It just wasn't. I don't know. My feeling is that they didn't understand my sincerity. They didn't understand the level of sincerity that I had. I think they thought I was trying to make this the Joey show. And in reality, I was like, no, it's just that I know that our students are taking out an enormous amount of money to be where they are. And it's not good enough to just show up to work and give the students a hard time, treat them like little kids, and or treat them like they're at a job already, and to just get the work done and behave and don't get out of line. And I was just like, no, like this has got to be like a creative Disneyland. I want you to come and try different things and challenge yourself and others in a playful way, like at a place like that, where it's like a playscape, where yeah, there's some bumpers and stuff. I'm not gonna let y'all die. Hopefully, I'm gonna try my best not to. But I want you to take some risks and write some papers, or write some scripts, or do some projects that, like, yeah, would normally, you would be like, man, I wouldn't do this in a class normally, but like, because Joey's letting me do this, I'm gonna try it. Like I'm gonna try this thing because I want to see what happens. I want to see what happens, both in terms of, can we take our field further, but then also like, can you as a student like level up? Can you hit that wall that you thought was there and then it just move out of the way? Or do you hit yourself on that wall and then find the sidewalk, as David Goggins would say, and see a different path? Because to me, like that's how do I say this? I was going to say wholesome learning, but it's kind of like, to me, that's how, like, if I'm paying for something, I'm not paying to have the shit beat out of me. I'm paying to learn something in a way that is efficient for me and that helps me be reflective on my abilities and my inabilities in a way that I grow, and that growth helps me and helps other people around me, helps us as a whole. And I think that that's something that's often kind of just, I don't know, not even thought about. I mean, a lot, honestly, a lot of people that get PhDs are getting them to be professors and researchers of their field. They're theoreticians. They're not necessarily teachers. And so that's another side of it. And then, people are just going through different things in their lives. People have stress. They have their kids. They have, divorces. They have, disabilities. They have, things they're trying to overcome on a personal level. And a lot of times, I look at what's happening in a classroom, and I'm trying to sit there and go like, yeah, I know that's happening to the teacher, but that's also happening to our students. We've got to take that into consideration for them and be reflective and help them and guide them, and hear them and challenge you all, and are those that have taken classes with me. I noticed a couple of y'all online. That's why I say it like that. But yeah, I that was really how I got into teaching and mixed my business with it. Now, how I started my business was that I got fired at UIW and I was putting all those job apps in, and I was like, well, what can I do? I mean, I can sit here and feel sorry for myself because I know these job apps, for those that don't know, when you apply in the fall, you maybe hear back in the spring, and then you get hired for that next fall. So for sure, I knew I was going to be out for at least 1 year, if not 2 years, right? So I didn't get a job right after I lost my job. So meaning that I applied for jobs while I was still working. I didn't get it that cycle, right? So I had to put a whole nother cycle in and be out of work a year. So I had to take humble pie, move in with my sister. I had to ask my parents for money. Now I'm married. I'm like in my late 30s. This is like really not fun to do, but that's what I did. And then I just had to change the whole way I think about money. And I went from making like $90,000 a year to like zero. And my wife was still working, but I had spent we had spent way too much money in our 20s and owed all this money and had to pay it back. So it made for a really kind of grim time. And so I kind of foresaw that coming. And I was like, man, I'm going to need something to keep me busy. And my friend Christian, who was my friend then because he had graduated like 4 years earlier, when we still hung out, was like, hey, we should start a hi-fi store. And I was like, okay. He's like, no, really, we should. I said, well, I've got contacts. So if you're serious, you just let me know and we'll do it. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm serious. Like I've got the arcade building. He used to have an arcade. He had closed it. He had gone into this new profession. And I said, all right, well, let's do it. So I pulled out some of my retirement, which you're not supposed to do. But the reason I did that was that I didn't want to take out a loan. I knew I didn't want to take out loans anymore. I knew I didn't want to borrow money to do things. So I took out my own money. Christian put up the building, and we started Dreamoids. And we haven't looked back since. We have like a 5 to 10 year plan of actually being like sufficient. We were profitable right away, but we've been actually doing really well. And it was crazy because right before COVID, we had made more in the first 3 months than we had made all of last year. Like that's how well we were doing. So it was really crazy to kind of go through that trajectory though, because I just had some some stereo stuff. We put it in there. Then we actually bought our inventory, and then we just I just pretended like I had owned a hi-fi store before, not just helped at one. And I learned how to do all the books, and my dad helped me out because he's like an accountant. And so I learned how to do profit and losses. I learned how to do inventory and just like a bunch of different stuff that when I went to go fill out these grants, right, that I got like tens of thousands of dollars for last year, I was like, dude, I can do all this. Like, this is just like my business. And then when I'm like fulfilling things for my grants, it just makes it that much easier for me to like look at business opportunities. And if they have any paperwork, anything like that, I'm like, oh, that's not a big deal. You need to get this or that or blah, 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 and figure it out. But I'm not as intimidated by it because like that's something that was quelled because I was doing it for my business, and now I know how to go into a meeting with academics and talk about the budget or talk about projects and ideas and know what's feasible, know what questions to ask. And the other side of that too is that I also, like I said, there were 3 things I did, right? I did academia, hi-fi, and technology. And when, between around 2003 to 2010, I was I was really heavy in the startup scene in Austin. I knew all the, not all, but like I knew a lot of investors. I had a lot of friends that had done startups. I had friends that were making millions of dollars with their ideas and had moved out to San Francisco and, had their own businesses and buildings downtown and all that fun stuff. And I was just like, I was surrounded at a really young age from like 20, because that would be like 25 to, or 23 to 30 years old. I was surrounded by people who were just being successful, who were going out and doing what they wanted to do and making money doing it, or were doing what they wanted to do and making it. And so they weren't like super well off, but they were like going and doing what their dream was. It says, don't let me derail your story, but on the business side of things, do you have to know and request the appropriate tax forms when running your own business, or does the IRS know and give them to you? No, you need to do that. And like how you decide what kind of business you're going to start kind of has a couple of different avenues. Some people like just by default, like say you are like, oh, I'm going to start a business, and you go and open up a business checking account, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do some consulting. My name's Joseph Lopez, so you just bill me as Joseph Lopez. I don't know, I consulted you on a project, or I went and mowed your yard for $50. Okay, I want you to pay $50 to me. I'm going to go put that in my account. Okay, well, I made $50. It's in my business account. And that's like it. Now, you started that business, right? And so say you go and you're like, okay, I've now gone and done like 50 yards and, or say 1,000 yards, okay, at $50 a pop. And so, what is that, $5,000 or something like that? Yeah. So you've made $5,000. Well, here are some things that like will come back around on you. One, yeah, you're going to need to pay income tax on that, because basically what you are is a sole proprietor. So you will end up having to do what they call like a 1099 style form, a consulting form, and you'll have to pay out your income tax. And then on top of that, there's some things you probably should think about, like, what if you were mowing the yard and like a kid comes and trips and falls on your lawnmower and, I don't know, cracks their head open. It's like, do you have some kind of business insurance to like protect you from that? Those are the things that like are the next thing that you kind of want to think about is, do you have insurance for the services you're trying to provide? Like that was one of the things that like really intimidated me at starting our business and our building, was like, I was like, oh dang, we need to get like business insurance. And so I talked to an insurance agent, which are not hard to find, by the way. They all want to do business with you. I found an insurance salesperson, got insurance from them, ended up meeting another insurance agent that was like, whoa, I just looked at your policy and like, this is totally invalid. Like you need to get a different policy. So I really went through that policy and read it. And then I took his policy up that the person offered me. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. Like this is not a good policy. So now I use like Liberty Mutual for our business. Not that I'm plugging them, but that's who we use. And so it's kind of things like that. It's like, as you get more serious, you want to think about things like that. But a lot of times, like before that, like I've done a lot of technology consulting. People will pay me $100 an hour to go and look at their infrastructure, to go look at, a computer setup or editing setup, video editing, photography, all those kinds of things. And that's like, again, like a 1099 style thing where I'm going to do work for them. They're going to cut me a check for the work. And then when tax season comes around, they're going to send me a 1099 form and say, hey, you performed this work. This is on file with the IRS. Make sure you pay your taxes on it. So that's kind of how that starts out. Now, the other side that was also scary for me was doing sales tax, because I sell things, right? Like when you sell objects, you charge sales tax. And so that was the other thing I had to learn, was like filing quarterly sales tax. Like, March just ended 2 weeks ago, so I had to go and pay that 1 year's worth of sales in 3 months. We had to go pay sales tax on that. It was thousands and thousands of dollars. And so, you have to, like, when you're doing your budget, yeah, you're making all this money, but a portion of that's going to go to taxes. And when you sell that much at once, you have to sit, and you're not used to it. You have to sit there and go like, okay, we've got to put like thousands of dollars aside and make sure that like we have this ready to pay. And so that's also where people can probably run into some trouble, is like dealing with sales tax. And for us, it's not as bad because we sell pretty big items, and so when you sell something like, I don't know, say we sell something for $1,000, and that's like 8,250. This is what the sales tax is going to be, because it's 0.0825, or 8 cents, 0.25 cents, and in San Antonio. And so for me, it's like I can keep pretty good track, because we're not selling hundreds of items. We're selling tens of items. But like, say you ran a restaurant, or you ran like a record store, and you're selling, $5 a pop, $1 a pop, $30 a pop. And you got all these little transactions with all these little finite, 82 cents, 40 cents, 10 cents of sales tax. You got to make sure that you have like some kind of Quickens, or we use Square. Like, Square is really good for kind of understanding what your transaction is and your taxes for it are. But yeah, no, they're not going to tell you. You need to go and do it. And remember, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. So like, I'm just giving you general advice. But yeah, that's how I would answer your question. But don't let that intimidate you. Yeah, it's scary. You never want the IRS to come after you. That would not be fun. I've met IRS agents, and I've met people that have been had to kind of do an audit with the IRS, and everybody I hang out with has done all right, because they were trying to do what was right. They may have just had some kind of error or misfile, but yeah, starting my own business was scary but therapeutic. It gave me a sense of control over things, and doing it the way we did it, how we did it, just cash. I mean, now it's like, wow, imagine if I had taken out a $500,000 small business loan, or even a $50,000 small business loan, and our income just dropping. Our sales have dropped heavily, but because we sell hi-fi, we are making sales, which is cool. I mean, I saw hi this week, but it's not like how it was. And so, that would have just been that much more burden on me personally, and on my business partner personally. But because of the way we're doing it, it's not a huge stressor. Whereas, man, I really do feel for other hi-fi stores. And then, of course, I feel for restaurants and all these other small businesses that were paying $2,000 to $5,000 a month in rent, right? Then paying their employees, paying for their food, paying for all the insurances, and for their CPA and everything like that. And now it's like they can't even be open, or they're doing to go, and it's really just kind of ruining their models. So yeah, starting a small business for me, my recommendation is don't take out any loans, use your own money. And I really believe in bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is where it's like you have a job already, and you start building this out on the side. And once you make more money doing it than the job that you have, you can switch. But until then, it's like, keep your day job, because I think that people who are really motivated can have a day job and work, and then make their money. Now, the other way is like, you just, you have a job, you've put some money aside, and now you're going to go and you're going to start this business. And that's for a really hungry person. You're really, really hungry. Like, you're going to live in that building that you're either renting or buying, hopefully buying. And everything in your life is going to that business until it is successful. Even during COVID, even during like everything that's going on, it's like your drive and your hunger is to keep this thing alive. And it's literally like a little baby, and you're gonna carry this thing on through, and that is how you'll make it. It's just owning a business is it's not rocket science, but it's like an endurance race. It's like a triathlete or something like that. There's a lot of different obstacles that come up, and a lot of different things that you have to deal with as you go through that are going to be challenging to you, and are going to challenge you, and you're going to have arguments with in all kinds of different ways for all different kinds of things that end up being a huge deal and sometimes end up being like nothing. And you and your business partner look at each other like, why were we even worried about that? But it's something that I recommend everybody try. Just like you go and you get a job doing something just because you want the experience, like an internship, I recommend starting a business or doing some kind of consulting. A lot of my students are great photographers or videographers. Like that's a great place to start. Like just go try and do a wedding. I've done weddings before. Go try and do like a quinceañera shoot or like a sweet 16 shoot. Go do an event planning for like a cousin or something. If you're into event planning, or if you're into, I don't know, one of my students this semester is into interior design. It's like start on your own place and then try and convince someone else that you can do their place and see what happens. And like, just build a portfolio, like not fake it till you make it. And you being a fake person, fake it until you make it, as in like, yes, I understand that I am not a professional, but I have the desire and passion to become one. And so I am going to pretend to be one until I am one. It's like I don't know if that makes sense or if that was helpful, but it's like that's what I'm really trying to do when I go and do these things. Like I had taught my students for over 10 years how to go do professional broadcast production. I had never done it, never. And one of my colleagues, this guy Kay Cruz, was like, when I was unemployed, was like, hey, I know you need money. I know you also just need some work and to kind of keep going. Like, I'm going to go do the Final Four. You want to go do the Final Four with me? It's here in San Antonio. CBS Sports in New York needs a PA, which is just like the guy that goes and runs and gets whatever you need. I'm going to be an audio E&G there. There's going to be 4 crews, and each crew will have a PA, a production assistant, a audio person, a video person, a producer, and then an editor. And so you'll get put on a team, and that's what you'll do. So I like get an email from CBS New York, and that's what I signed up for. And for it was like 4 or 5 days, that's what I did. And I was just Joey. It wasn't like Dr. Joe, Dr. Lopez at that. I was like little shit, like just the most measly of person there. But again, I just put my anthropologist hat on and I was like, okay, let's see how everybody treats each other. Let's see what the semantics are. Let's see what the semiotics are of like interfacing and seeing people and interacting with people and being in the locker room, being on the floor when they win. I was literally there when the confetti all drops and like Kay talks about. And for those of y'all that know him, Kay Cruz is one of like, he's like this guy I met that I thought was full of shit that was totally just a badass. No joke. And it's like, it's funny because I have a sense of humor in dire situations, but no joke. He came to my popular culture class this semester and was like, y'all are generation survival. And he's real serious like that, like in a playful way, if that makes sense. Because he's like this kind of like Hawaiian hippie kind of sounding guy. And he's like, y'all are generation survival. You just got to get out of this alive. And then fucking COVID hits. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm over here like doing these remote discussions. And I'm like, Kay, you were like too right sometimes, a little too close for comfort. So yeah, it's like, but then, you go and you meet all these people and you do all these things. And it's like, then you have these experiences and if I hadn't have been unemployed for that year, I don't think I would have had the exponential growth that I did. It really made me grow up. It made me cut some bad habits. It made me pick up some good habits, like dealing with stress by working out. Like that became like just second nature to me. Like right now, I mean, today it's like I look at my phone and I haven't even ridden yet, but I've walked over 12,000 steps, almost 13,000 steps, just because I was out power washing and went for a walk with the kids. Like I'm I know I need to stay healthy. I know I need to keep going. I have diabetes and high blood pressure, and like, there's stuff to think about. So it's the last like 5 minutes of my AMA. Are there any other questions? How are y'all doing? Kick me some feedback up in the chat over here. I see there's a couple of y'all still hanging out. Any other questions? Let's see here. If y'all don't have any questions, I have something to talk about. So, hey, Joey, hope the family is well. Oh, Ramel. Ramel is a great student of mine from UIW. Good business person, great attitude. So Ramel, like, final project in my class was faking a new technology that came out, and we had all these tech people show up, and they all like bought it. It was cool. It worked out. We had to explain to them that it really wasn't real and that we hadn't really come up with that technology. Last thing I wanted to talk about was, dang it, Ramel, you sidetracked me. What was it? It was here we go. I remember now. So I think the last AMA I did, people asked me what I read, like what I read. And I told them that I do a lot of listening and I watch a lot of videos. And this past week, I was teaching my popular culture class. And we're talking about the internet and social networks. So I told them to watch The Social Network. With JT, Justin Timberlake. And it got me thinking. I was like, how did I learn so much about technology? How did I learn the history of tech? And, one way I learned was that I did take a history of computing course at UT Austin in the computer science department. It was one of the driest courses I took. And the guy was like an uber nerd / geek that taught it. But man, did I enjoy it. Everybody else thought that was kind of crazy because I was just having so much fun in it because they were all computer science. But my real answer is that I watched the Triumph of the Nerds. It's a 3-piece PBS series. And while that series is not perfect, it's hugely misogynistic, by the way, it like sets the groundwork for you to go and look up a bunch of stuff. It's 3 hours overall, and it's great. It's all about the personal computer. If you are in any way a nerd and just want to know this stuff like I do, watch that. And by watch it, I mean watch it like, I've probably watched it 10 times, at least. That's the other thing is that if I like something, I listen to it a lot and watch it a lot. It's called, let me see here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I have this document for my students because I was going to tell them about this. I'll give you all the link to the Google Doc because I actually have, let me see here. There we go. Get shareable link. See if that works. And the other one that's on there, that's on the drive, is it's called, and this one I learned about like in 2010. I didn't learn about it when it was out. It's called Nerds 2.0.1, and it's the same as Triumph of the Nerds, but it's about how the internet was made. And this is great. I mean, this is really great for if you're trying to figure out kind of how the internet came to be before 2010. And then the last one that's in that document is going to be Hackers, Wizards of the Electronic Age. And this is a great piece if you want to just kind of see what really young geeks were doing in the 80s that ended up becoming like huge icons in the 21st century. I really recommend checking them out. That's what I would do is like I just sit there and I read. I mean, well, not read. I watch all this stuff. I just watch it and watch it and watch it. Like, I don't know how many of y'all know this, but most of y'all do. That I'm a huge fan of the interview with Joe Rogan and David Goggins. I've shown that interview in multiple classes since I saw it, and it's been something that I highly recommend. But I've listened to that interview, which is I think 2 or 3 hours long. It's an hour and 54 minutes. There's 2 of those interviews, 2 different ones, but that's the one I recommend checking out first. I've listened to that probably 20 times. I'll be riding my bike and I just have it on. And it's just about how he went from doing nothing to wanting to be something, and what it took to do that, and how to just not stop. And I just really liked his story. I liked how it wasn't as easy as he thought it was, and it wasn't as hard as he thought it was. It's like you just have to keep existing. So anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this chat. I'm going to have one again next week. I'll probably just do this indefinitely until I don't feel like doing it anymore. But I'm so glad y'all tuned in. And feel free to hit me up on Facebook. Feel free to hit me up on YouTube. You can please subscribe to my channel. It makes a huge difference. And then I sent out in the chat, there's my Instagram. Please follow me on Instagram. And I hope y'all are having a great day. And if y'all need anything, just hit me up, because I'm like this big right now, you know? All right, y'all take it easy.